The IRA bomb London. These bombings attempt to sap the will of politicians and the resolve of public opinion by confronting them with an unedifying, unending and costly battle. The IRA seeks to weary Britain into abandoning Northern Ireland.
And no further forward, please. You've got to get out now. The fire brigade are going to do something peculiar.
But a strategy that seeks to sicken and weary can easily provoke antagonism and anger. When 21 people were killed in the Birmingham pub explosions during the bombing campaign of 1974, British public opinion simply hardened against the IRA. The result was the draconian Prevention of Terrorism Act, passed within 4 days. The IRA bombs of the mid-70s proved counterproductive. Now the attacks are largely directed against the security forces and members of the British establishment. Civilian deaths have fallen dramatically. In Ireland, the Provisional IRA cannot contemplate a military victory in the conventional sense, but it does attempt to make the province ungovernable. The Provisionals have kept the army in Northern Ireland for over a decade. It has proved impossible to defeat them, as Army intelligence reports. The Provisionals' campaign of violence is likely to continue while the British remain in Northern Ireland. That the IRA has been able to wage such a war of attrition is largely due to the tacit, if ambivalent, support it gets from parts of the Catholic community. Army intelligence again. There are still areas within the province, both rural and urban, where terrorists can base themselves with little risk of betrayal and can count on active support in emergency. Many Catholics, although unhappy about the methods of the IRA, are completely committed to its aim, a united Ireland.
The ambivalence which so puzzles and annoys people, that people who are not themselves in favour of violence, still because of their making a distinction between the objectives of terrorists and their methods, will go so far in cooperating with security forces, but will go no further. They will not, in other words, hand over suspects, because whatever they may feel, whatever revulsion on moral grounds they may feel, there are other considerations of dissent involved in their unwillingness to cooperate with a regime to which they do not ascribe legitimacy.
In those circumstances, it is difficult for the processes of law and order to function normally. It becomes difficult to get convictions. Witnesses are silent, juries nervous. In 1973, normal legal procedures were suspended. The new courts sit before a judge without a jury. Most convictions have to be obtained from confessions. It's not really surprising, therefore, that during interrogation at police stations, like this one at Castlereagh, confessions have been extracted under severe physical and mental duress. Strenuous attempts, helped by media indifference, were made to deny this. However, it was officially admitted in a government report in 1979. In the Maze prison, those found guilty of terrorist offences, both Republican and Loyalist, were given special status, including the right to wear civilian clothes. In 1976, it was abolished. The H Block prisoners remembered Ireland's tradition of prison protest.
The role of prisoners, the way in which prisoners are part of the struggle, the way in which prisoners behave, the role of a hunger strike, passive resistance, it has echoes throughout Irish history, which those involved are very conscious of, and indeed which effectively legitimizes virtually the entire range of conduct.
When prisoners convicted of terrorist offences were denied special status in 1976, they refused to wear prison uniform. Left naked, they covered themselves with their blankets. They were not allowed to leave their cells wearing blankets and would have had to go to the lavatories naked. This they refused. When chamber pots were upset during altercations with prison officers, they smeared their excrement on the walls rather than allow it to foul their bedding and soil the floor. What was at stake was whether these men were political prisoners or criminals, whether the authorities would admit that their crimes were politically motivated.
We're political prisoners! We want political status!
Special status would admit that these men were fighting for a cause, in a sense legitimize their actions. It is traditional in Republican politics that prisoners conduct and organize their own protests. After 4 years of this protest, there was growing doubt about its effectiveness, and the prisoners decided to resort to the traditional weapon of the Republican prisoner, the hunger strike. On the 27th of October 1980, 7 men, the same number as had signed the proclamation in 1916, refused food. Ray McCartney, one of the strikers.
The whole system in Northern Ireland, both special arrest, special court system without jury, has proved to us beyond all doubt that these courts are set up to convict men just to convince people that we are criminals, which we are not. We are a product of the political troubles in Northern Ireland at this moment.
When the agreement that ended the strike broke down, another began. The first man to die was Bobby Sands. By early August 1981, 7 more men have fasted to death in the Maze prison. Others may follow. The electors of Fermanagh and South Tyrone had returned Sands to the British Parliament. Widespread support in Catholic areas for the hunger strikers was further demonstrated when tens of thousands turned out for his funeral. Later, another hunger striker was elected to the Irish Parliament. As a British helicopter circled the procession, Sands was given the traditional Republican salute. As Sands' son, sister and mother took their place at the special plot reserved in Milltown Cemetery for Republican heroes, it was clear that the strikers' action, their slow and sensational deaths, had brought to the world's attention their cause in particular and the Northern Ireland question in general. The British government refused to concede the strikers' demands, yet in propaganda terms the strike seemed to be effective. More than 40 film crews, some of them perched on a specially built rostrum, turned up to record the funeral. The world's press was generally critical of what it saw as British intransigence.
As a freedom fighter and a political prisoner hungering for justice.
An oration was delivered over the grave.
As he himself wrote, "Of course I can be murdered, but I remain what I am, a political prisoner of war, and no one, not even the British, can change that." Bobby Sands, your sacrifice will not be in vain. Today we rededicate ourselves and our struggle, and pledge ourselves not only to win the 5 demands, but to drive England out of our country once and for all.
The psychology of the hunger strike was summed up by the first Republican to starve himself to death in a British prison in 1921. Terence McSweeney, Lord Mayor of Cork and IRA commander, wrote, "It is not those who can inflict the most, but those that can suffer the most who will conquer."